Hello and welcome to First Post America. I'm Eric Hammond. We're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And today we look at DOGE's fuzzy math and President Donald Trump stuns Venezuela. More on those stories and others from the United States and around the world. But first, here's a look at the latest headlines. The U.S. Supreme Court pauses a lower court's order requiring President Trump's administration to pay nearly $2 billion in foreign aid payments. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer visits the United States as he tries to convince President Donald Trump that a lasting peace in Ukraine will endure only if Kyiv and Europe are at the negotiating table. Hamas calls on Israel to begin negotiations for the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire after the group handed over the bodies of 4 hostages in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Taiwan detects 45 Chinese aircraft around the island, the highest number this year. And this comes after Taipei condemned China's live-fire drills near the self-ruled island. And Oscar-winning Hollywood actor Gene Hackman and his wife were found dead in their home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The case is under investigation. We begin right here in Washington, where South Carolina Congressman Joe Wilson has stirred up a whirlwind of controversy with his bold proposal to introduce a $250 bill featuring none other than President Donald Trump. If Wilson's audacious plan gets the green light, the commander-in-chief would become the first living president to grace the U.S. currency. Wilson's proposal rides the wave of what he calls Bidenflation, a term coined by critics to blame the inflation surge on former President Joe Biden's administration. Now, taking to social media platform X, Wilson declared that he's grateful to announce the design of a $250 bill featuring President Trump, and even blamed the former president for crippling the economy and forcing American families to carry more cash. Reactions on Wilson's post erupted faster than a stock market crash, and supporters hailed the idea as both practical and patriotic. Meanwhile, critics pounced, dismissing the move as a cheap political stunt. Back in mid-2022, inflation in the United States skyrocketed to 9.1%, marking the highest spike in 4 decades. And while many point fingers at former President Biden's economic policies, including lavish government spending and pandemic stimulus measures, inflation has since cooled to 3% in 2025. But the sting of rising prices still lingers.
We live in a world in which the reality tends to be gloomy if the party that I'm not supporting is in power, and becomes rosy immediately when actually there's a change in the White House. Now, there's definitely also certainly hardship for many Americans that actually kind of been witnessed over the last couple of years. So if you look at the numbers, we've seen inflation cumulatively over the last 4 years, over 20 percentage points. So numbers many of us we hadn't seen to our lifetime.
And now, despite inflation easing, some fear that President Trump's proposed tariffs on goods from Mexico, Canada, and China could send prices soaring once again.
The Tax Policy Center has just put out an analysis suggesting that after-tax U.S. household income could fall by 1% as a result of these tariffs. That's a cost of about $1,000 to the average U.S. household. So it's not a huge hit for American households, but it is likely to make them worse off. To be honest, I think it is very hard to find any kind of economic rationale for the tariffs on Mexico and Canada. These are the US's biggest trading partners. In some sense, they're also its closest allies. And it is a little bit of a mystery what Trump is trying to achieve with these tariffs.
But with economic uncertainty swirling and fiery debates on trade policies ahead, the fate of both inflation and Wilson's proposed $250 bill hangs in the balance. Whether this bill becomes a piece of history or fades into a political footnote, one thing is certain: the controversy surrounding it is only just beginning. And staying in Washington, the Department of Government Efficiency claims to have saved $65 billion in federal funds However, recent data provided by DOGE shows proof of canceling some federal contracts and lease agreements worth only $144 million. The rest of the savings are still unverified. DOGE says they want to provide real-time data, but data lags are the reason for the missing details. And with no clear breakdown of where the money is coming from, critics are questioning if DOGE's numbers are real or just inflated claims. Our next report breaks it all down.
January 20, 2025. That is when the U.S. Government Department of Efficiency, or DOGE, was formed. Launched under President Donald Trump, DOGE was set up for smoother government administration. It promised to hunt down waste, save billions of dollars for the Americans, and much more. And to do that, Trump trusted his closest aide, Elon Musk, who was appointed to lead DOGE.
The overall goal here with the DOGE team is to help address the enormous deficit. We simply cannot sustain as a country $2 trillion deficits. The interest rates, just the interest on the national debt, now exceeds the Defense Department spending. We spend a lot on the Defense Department, but we're spending over $1 trillion on interest. If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing, it is an essential thing. That's the reason I'm here.
But critics are saying it's more smoke than substance. The body spearheaded by Musk released its second batch of data recently. They claim to have saved $65 billion in federal funds. But much like a social media platform X, the receipts were blurry, the details were vague, and proper fact-check was nowhere to be found. The latest data released by the advisory board has only shown proof of cutting some federal contracts and $144 million in lease terminations. The rest of the money, no breakdowns, no details. Just a grand number with no way to verify if it is real. The contracts DOGE lists add up to $9.6 billion in savings. This is a number nowhere near the $65 billion figure it claims to have saved. DOGE says the rest supposedly comes from fraud detection, workforce cuts, and other vague categories. But there's no way of substantiating it. DOGE's latest data, posted overnight on Monday, claims 2,299 federal contracts have been terminated across 47 government departments. This is almost double the 1,100 contracts it reported last week. However, one key number still hasn't changed. The website still lists $144 million in lease cancellations. It is the same figure that was reported last week, with no new updates provided. DOGE has also added a new disclaimer after a major mistake in its earlier report. Last week, it claimed savings worth $8 billion on a single contract. But later, it admitted the real number was just $8 million. The correction raised doubts about its reported savings. Moreover, DOGE claims to have cut nearly $900 million from the U.S. Department of Education's budget. But researchers say that the numbers don't add up. A new analysis shows nearly $400 million wasn't saved, but actually wasted. A separate review by progressive think tank New America found major errors in DOGE's math. 2 weeks ago, the Musk-led body said it saved $881 million. It was done by cancelling 89 contracts in the Education Department, but the actual value of those contracts was close to $676 million. After being pointed fingers at, DOGE quietly corrected its mistake. Its Wall of Receipts website, where it posts its cost-cutting efforts for public, now lists the saving as $489 million, not $881 million. And this was done without explaining the huge drop. Experts from both conservative and progressive think tanks have pointed out similar errors across DOGE's reports. Some even say the agency isn't saving money, it's just miscalculating and exaggerating its impact. These incidences directly contradict Musk's promise that the Department of Government Efficiency will be fully transparent. Instead of clear, accurate data, it has been riddled with confusion and mistakes. DOGE's credibility is on the line. If it needs to prove its worth, it needs to start with truth. Without being honest, its numbers seem more like sales pitch than actual savings for now.
And now more from the White House, where President Donald Trump on Wednesday announced that he's revoking a Biden-era license that allowed Chevron to produce oil in Venezuela. Taking to his social media platform Truth Social, President Trump expressed dissatisfaction with Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro's failure to meet Washington's demands on deporting migrants. And without mentioning Chevron, he added his intention to reverse the concessions granted on November 26 of 2022, which were set for renewal on March 1st. Clapping back at President Trump's decision, Venezuela's vice president and oil minister condemned the move, calling it harmful and inexplicable. She even accused the country's political opposition of influencing the U.S. administration to adopt a tougher stance. However, this is not the first time President Trump has in fact threatened to axe Chevron's Venezuela oil license. And speaking to journalists on February 18th, the commander-in-chief suggested that the U.S. might block Venezuela's oil exports through Chevron.
Just a little clarity on, are you inclined to continue to allow Venezuela through, I think, Chevron and other oil companies to export those petroleum products, or are you
maybe not
to pull back on
Yeah, maybe not. We're looking at that now. I just got here. When I left, they weren't doing anything. They were ready to go. We give up. And then Biden came along and he gave them literally billions of dollars. I couldn't believe it, actually. And we have so much under our feet. Liquid gold, we have so much, and it was pretty amazing. So we're looking at that whole situation, why he did it.
The Chevron license, which was granted in November of 2022, had allowed Chevron to bypass American sanctions and extract oil in Venezuela. And now, amid the reversal, the move is a significant blow to Chevron, which produced over 200,000 barrels of oil daily in Venezuela, which is about 6% of its global output. Chevron's spokesperson acknowledged the announcement and said the company was reviewing its implications. He also emphasized that Chevron operates in full compliance with U.S. laws and sanctions.
We are aware of today's announcement and are considering its implications. Chevron conducts its business in Venezuela in compliance with all laws and regulations, including the sanctions framework provided by U.S. government.
And meanwhile, what remains uncertain is how the decision will affect U.S.-Venezuela relations in the long run. The halt in oil production may pressure the Venezuelan leader, but it could also worsen the South American nation's humanitarian crisis and trigger new waves of migration to the United States. And now we move to Canada, where the Arctic is heating up, not just from climate change, but from rising geopolitical interest. With oil, gas, minerals, and fish up for grabs, countries like the United States and Russia are increasing their Arctic presence. And even China, despite not bordering the region, sees it as a vital global crossroads. This growing competition has forced Canada to act swiftly to safeguard its territory and to protect its sovereignty. Canada is boosting its military and diplomatic efforts. In fact, the Trudeau government has announced plans to deploy patrol ships, icebreakers, submarines capable of operating under the ice cap, surveillance planes, and drones. These resources will strengthen monitoring capabilities and improve response times in emergencies.
The Ranger, who is a reservist in the Canadian Army, yes, it's our eyes, it's our ears, but it's also a permanent presence of the Canadian forces throughout the North. The Ranger is fundamental to the security of the Canadian North. There's no question about it.
However, climate change is making the Northwest Passage of the Arctic increasingly accessible, offering a shorter route between Europe and Asia. And with increased ship traffic, the risk of accidents in the region remains the greatest adversary.
In a lot of our more remote communities, there isn't the capacity to have a full-time military force. So what the Rangers represent to the Canadian military is the ability to have in each community a reserve force that is able to rapidly force project to react to anything like an issue with regards to a breach of sovereignty, potentially a major air disaster, somebody in the community might go missing.
The outgoing prime minister announced an update of the country's 2017 defense policy in April of last year by placing more emphasis on the country's Arctic and northern territories. And the policy saw an additional 8.1 billion Canadian dollars of 5.9 billion US dollars for military spending, which will be rolled out over the next 5 years. And the country's defense budget was also increased from the current $30 billion to $50 billion by 2029. So as Canada wraps up its Arctic strategy, the region's future remains uncertain Yet the ice continues to melt and global interest intensifies. With Canada set to choose a new leader on March 9th, how will the nation navigate through these frozen, uncharted waters that will shape the country's future for decades to come? And finally, we conclude with the digital war between the two most influential apps. With TikTok's future in the United States more uncertain than ever, Instagram is keen to capitalize on it. In fact, Meta is reportedly planning to launch Reels as a standalone app, hoping to swoop in and claim the short-form video throne if TikTok in fact gets the boot. But given Meta's track record with copycat apps, is this just another doomed attempt, or could Reels finally take off on its own? Our final report seeks to answer these critical questions.
If there's one thing Meta excels at, it's swooping in like a digital vulture when a rival is on the ropes. And with TikTok's fate in the US hanging by a thread, Instagram is reportedly plotting its next power move. Instagram wants to launch Reels as a standalone app. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that Meta loves a good clone attempt. Whether it thrives like Instagram stories or flops spectacularly like video sharing app Lasso.
Behind you in the cabinet.
According to reports, Instagram chief Adam Mosseri let this little nugget slip to staff earlier this week. The idea, you ask? If TikTok gets the boot, Instagram wants to be the first in line with an alternative. Like good Samaritans, they want to ensure that America's scrolling thumbs never go idle. This isn't the first time Meta has pulled a "hey, we can do that too" moment. Back in 2018, it rolled out Lasso, a TikTok competitor that quickly went the MySpace way. More recently, Meta launched Edits, a video editing app clearly aimed at poaching users from CapCut, TikTok's sibling app. And now, with TikTok's future cloudier than ever, it seems Meta is dusting off the playbook once again. So why is TikTok in trouble? Well, the US government isn't exactly thrilled about a Chinese-owned platform having access to data from nearly 170 million American users. Officials fear that China's ByteDance, which is TikTok's parent company, could be collecting sensitive information. For example, data, messages, and who knows, maybe even your favorite dance challenges for nefarious purposes. The legal saga has been dragging on for over a year. Lawmakers have been pushing ByteDance to either sell TikTok's US operations or pack up and leave. The situation hit a boiling point in January this year when the US Supreme Court upheld legislation effectively banning the app unless ByteDance agreed to sale. However, in a classic political twist, President Donald Trump issued a last-minute executive order. He delayed the ban for 75 days to explore a compromise.
No, there's a lot of people interested in TikTok, and I think we have a chance of doing something good. And we'll be speaking to China about that also, because they're a party to it, obviously. But it would be great to keep TikTok alive, sell it to somebody that's going to do a great job with it.
Let's see.
Public sentiment is equally divided. According to reports, 77% of Americans feel uneasy about TikTok's Chinese ownership, while 63% support either a ban or a forced sale. 19% wanted ByteDance to remain in control, with officials from the United States overseeing it, while 15% didn't really care about who owns the platform.
It'll be extremely interesting to see. I do think our national security is incredibly important, but I understand TikTok is the livelihood of millions of Americans who make their money on it. They've made their entire business on that platform. So I do hope that Trump, being the businessman he is, loving Americans the way he does, will do everything he can to restore TikTok while also quashing any national security concerns. He's the man. If anybody can make dreams happen, it's definitely Donald Trump.
With the clock ticking on TikTok's temporary reprieve, which is set to expire in April 2025, Meta is positioning itself as the next best thing. If TikTok disappears from the United States, Instagram's standalone Reels app could swoop in to keep short-form video addicts entertained.
That's First Post America for this Thursday. I'm Eric Ham signing off from our studios right here in Washington, D.C. Thanks everyone for tuning in.